Hello, you guys. Welcome to Cake Radio, or welcome back if you're already a fan. I'm the Cake Dive, and in a shocking turn of events, this episode is releasing on ZCN Ticket. And if this shows anything about me, it shows that I can't make no decision. It shows me I can make some good decisions every now and then, but when it comes to this podcast, I'll just be switching it up every now and then. I don't know, because this podcast has had such a wild time trying to find a dedicated home for it on YouTube. It's crazy. First, I was just, for context, for those who are watching on ZCN Ticket, or for those who are watching this for the first time, my name is the Cake Dive. I am a content creator, and I put out a lot of content on two different channels. I put a lot of content out on ZCN Ticket, which is my entertainment brand that covers the best in box office and film and television news, as well as original films and shows created by yours truly. And there's also my namesake CakeDive channel, which I use to put out a lot of gaming, um, memes, parodies, sketches. So a lot of people might know me between the two channels. And there's also the Cake Radio podcast, which is a podcast that I've been doing for about a year now, um, which has been kind of covering a lot of pop culture stuff and film content. And up until this point, there have only been 2 to 3 episodes that have popped up on YouTube, and they've appeared on 3 different channels. The first episode was covering Megan. It was my review on Megan, and um, I had a third YouTube channel that I don't really use as much anymore, which is currently called CakeDive Gold. I originally was having conversations, and I was thinking of turning that channel into a cake radio channel, sort of a dedicated hub for me to put out the podcast on going forward. Put that episode up. People were telling me to get rid of that change because people were not a fan of that change. I'm very much appreciative of audience feedback, so I took my L and removed the video and changed and aborted that reband and said, "All right, let's move forward." We move. And that video has been unlisted, but you can still listen to that episode of the podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms with the Cake Radio podcast. Um, and the other episode that has came out is on the Cake Dive channel. It still remains there, and it was my review on the Super Mario Brothers movie. It still stands to be the most watched and most streamed episode of the podcast to date, but it's also on the lower side for some of the videos that have popped up on the Cake Dive channel. And currently, I've been working on new videos for the Cake Dive channel just as much as I've been working on videos for ZCN Ticket. And I'm kind of going to be doing a rebranding sooner or later on that channel. I've kind of shifted over to some of the different channels that I've had, some of them including ZCN Ticket. For example, the Code Monkeys video for Up to Screen was originally a Cake Dive video, but it was edited and reformatted to be an episode to fit within the Up to Screen series. So and that video did really well for ZCN. I'm really proud of people tuning into that video, especially with it being the first time that we've discussed television content on ZCN. And I was like thinking and having conversations. I was kind of bouncing around my head. I'm like, okay, I'm doing this podcast, and a lot of times I like talking about film and television on this podcast. It kind of makes sense to at least test release an episode on YouTube on one of the best entertainment channels out there, and that's ZCN Ticket. No shade. So I hope that you guys like this podcast. I hope you guys, if you enjoy it, share it around with your friends, subscribe to the ZCN Ticket YouTube channel, and let me know what next topics to talk about. I plan on doing current events on the show, but if you want me to talk about more box office news, more awards shows, stuff like that, feel free to let me know in the comments. And if you want to listen to this on podcast platform, subscribe and share the podcast on there. We're on all major platforms: Apple Music, Spotify, Google Podcast. We're on a lot of the major platforms, so you could be free to search us, and we're probably on there. If not, you could always request. That being said, let's hop into the news before I talk about the main course, which is my review on the Marvels. The strikes are over. The SAG-AFTRA has finally voted to approve the the agreement between them and the studios, officially ending the strike. I could not be more happier for the talent. This is something that I have been very supportive of from the beginning. I think that low key, to be honest, everybody should be going on strike because nobody being paid enough. I'm really happy that a lot of people were paying attention to these strikes and were very supportive of the actors, the writers, and the rest of the talent who were involved in this process. And I'm so happy that the actors and the writers have formally gotten agreements for the next 3 years, so that they have higher pay, better access to stuff like healthcare. Protections of AI have been discussed and or encodified. These are a lot of major steps that needed to be made as soon as possible, especially as technology continues to evolve, as artificial intelligence continues to evolve, and as streaming continues to try to become profitable and make sense of what the streaming market is. So again, very happy for the SAG-AFTRA, all the actors that are involved, and the rest of the talent who are aligned with them. Speaking of streaming, Warner Brothers has canceled Coyote versus Acme, and I need David Zaslav to realize what PR is. I need him to realize what good PR is, because this is just not working out for Warner Brothers Discovery. For those who are out of the loop, Coyote versus Acme was a live action animated hybrid film starring John Cena, and it was originally intended to release on Max, previously HBO Max. The film was pulled from the streaming service release calendar, and they were having discussions of potentially releasing it in theaters. And a few days ago, it was announced that that is no longer the case, and Warner Brothers is deciding to just shelf the film completely and write it off for about $30 million in taxes. And nobody's happy with this decision. I think the only people who are happy with this decision is Warner Brothers, because tax write-off, hooray! But literally nobody else is happy with this decision, because the talent's upset, because a film that they worked very hard on, and a film that, from what I've been hearing, was testing very well in test screenings, is now no longer going to see the light of day unless a cut is leaked. There's the audiences and, the fans of, Looney Tunes, and those who are supportive of films like these, the animation community, is also very upset, because this isn't the first time that this has happened. This isn't the first time this has happened with Warner Bros. Discovery, especially. And to cancel a film that has already been completed and done and was sitting ready for release with a lot of hard work and talent put into it is unacceptable, hands down, point blank, period. And the fact that David Zaslav and the people at Warner Bros. Discovery have repositioned how this film was going to release so that it could fit their strategy. Because I be following what they were saying. They said that they don't plan on doing streaming movies anymore. Okay, they pulled the film from the release counter for Max. They said they're going to be focusing primarily on theatrical movies going forward and theatrical animation. In this new statement for why they shelved this film and wrote off for taxes, they said they wanted to prioritize theatrical animation. Okay, release this film in the theaters. No, is this I'm not too sure what the issue is. And what makes it worse is, again, as I talked about before, the film was testing very well. I was hearing that, from people who have seen the movie that the film was testing in high 90s, and it was getting fairly well reception. And, regardless of that, they seemed to not have faith in it and didn't want to market and release this, so they decided to can it. And it's just kind of interesting to me. Animation content and like kids content. I will also say family content in general as a whole. Like family and that internet and that adult animation content as well. I think when it comes to content like that, they either try to stay in there, try to leave it to the teams that are involved. Like with Adult Swim, they've largely left Adult Swim untouched because it's fairly like a moneymaker and a fairly good um cross promotion tool to use Adult Swim with Max. But when it comes to the other assets that they have, you know, Cartoon Network, Boomerang, when it comes to some of the properties like Looney Tunes and stuff like that, they seem to kind of they don't know how to market it, they don't know how to release it, and they just kind of like, oh, we don't know what to do, and then they just kind of like can and cancel and reduce the output. And you know who loses in the end? Well, everybody loses in the end because they aren't really putting in they're not sure what to do, so they're making the wrong decisions, which is impacting the trust that they have with audiences and the respect that they have with audiences. So the audiences are turning around and saying, well, we're not getting the content that we used to get anymore, or we're not getting this content at all. What can we do? Where can we go to get this content? Because it's not on Max, it's not on these cable networks, it's not releasing in theaters. And I've seen a lot of tweets and I've seen a lot of people talk about how like this is kind of playing into the indie animation sort of boom that we're in with YouTube and other platforms, in which we're seeing a lot of creators come and make very stylistic, original um, original stories in animation, and they're getting millions of views, lots of backing from, you know, fans and supporters. Even if they don't like the show or the film, they still can at least respect it. Still, you know, they're still engaging with it because they're still talking about it. And it gets to the point in which, you know, eventually some of these streaming services and some of these companies kind of see the value in it and are like, oh, there's an audience for this. Let's tap into it. As we saw with Amazon doing with Casbin Hotel, you know, acquiring the rights from that from A24 and, you know, Vivzy. So and I would say like, and there's also, you know, the side with audiences with indie animation, which they know that animation has been dogged out for so long. It doesn't have the respect that it really deserves as an art form from, I guess, from like general audiences, from the public, and then the studios as well. So they're kind of like, you know, let's really support our own. Let's really root for each other here. And I think the audiences who are watching that content also have that same sentiment, which also explains why it's working for them. And it's not helping the studios that they're pulling back and they're kind of shaking their heads, kind of scratching their heads, confused as to what's going on, when there is proof that when you invest in these things, there is the risk that it might not work, that it might not be financially successful. But that's with anything. You have to take that risk. And the studios seem to not want to take that risk. And I think it's costing them in the long run. Um, the streaming numbers are still not growing. The services are still not profitable, regardless. So I think that they should still have some of these artful, you know, pieces of work. These should have these pieces of work come out and be released. And whether they do well or whether they don't do well, they still at least get the respect from audiences. So the Marvels is out. Um I'm not too sure people aren't gonna see it. It seems like it's currently tracking to do 40 to 50 million dollars in the opening weekend in the domestic box office. That is scheduled to be like one of the lowest opening for a Disney Marvel Cinematic Universe film ever. So it's gonna be real interesting to see the think pieces and stuff roll out for that. But I saw it. I'm explaining to you guys, you know, why I saw it, you know, how much it cost, and my experience seeing it, and obviously review the movie and give you my thoughts. The way I do, you know, reviews of movies with the Cake Radio podcast is I open with a non-spoiler portion of review, and then if there's any spoilers that I want to discuss, I will warn ahead of time and discuss the spoilers. But I don't really have too much to talk about on in terms of the film, so let's just hop into it. So first of all, it's been a minute since I've really seen superhero movies consistently. This seemed to be the year where I've seen, the most superhero movies in like a while. The last time I saw a superhero movie was okay, this year. This year, the two superhero movies that I saw were, Blue Beetle and of course this film, The Marvels. And the only reason that the only two reasons why I've seen both of those movies is one, the trailers didn't look horrible, and two, I didn't have to pay full price for either of those movies. The thing is with Blue Beetle, by the time I ended up seeing the movie been flopped. Like everybody was talking about how it was a flop. Like the movie was gonna earn its money back. Warner Brothers gave up on marketing it. Like it was kind of a wrap. So and it was about to drop out of theaters. Um, but AMC decided to like release it as like a $5 fan fave. So if you wanted to see it in theaters before it dipped, like they were offering it for like $5 a ticket with tax included. And I said, "Ooh, I love a deal." And I also had a $5 reward off of AMC stubs, and I was like, "Ooh, this is gonna be free. Let me hop on this." And that's how I saw that movie. And the movie was good actually. The movie was real fun. I definitely would recommend it to people if like someone had if there was a discussion of superhero movies and there was something that I want to speak highly of in films like that. I definitely like films that are kind of like solo standalone films that, are fun, campy, like and cute. And like this one really did a good job talking like, talking about family togetherness and stuff like that. Did have my issues with it, but it was still overall a fun time. Um the same thing I had with this is the same situation I kind of had with the Marvels, but probably a slightly different review. Um the only reason I saw the Marvels was, the trailers looked kind of fine. They didn't look too bad for, film. I did see Captain Marvel when it came out, and I, might be on the before y'all jump me. I like the movie. Okay, like listen, I know, when that movie came out, there's like this big hate train for the movie, and everyone was trying to like. There's a big hate train for like Brie Larson. Like people were not trying to rock with her, and they were saying, "Oh, I'm not going to watch the movie," and the movie earned $1 billion at the box office. So people were lying. People were not standing on business, and I think the same kind of sentiment still kind of exists. I don't think there's necessarily a hate train for Brie Larson now, but I think there's still like, and I'm gonna be let me talk about this. Hold on. I think that a lot of people need to be honest that people just don't like Brie Larson because she's like a woman. There wasn't really a solid reason for people to dislike Brie Larson or Captain Marvel the way that they did, because I saw the movie. I saw the same movie as you guys did. The movie was good. It wasn't great, but it was good. It was fun. Something cute. Um and I know when I've had conversations about like why people don't like Brie Larson, like I've seen some people kind of gravitate towards back when the hate train kicked off, when there were like videos that were going around of Brie Larson being on the press junkets with the Avengers during like Endgame and Infinity War coming out. I said those in the opposite direct. Well, yeah, Infinity War and Endgame coming out, and people just not really feeling, people really tearing apart the interviews. They're like, "Oh, like Brie Larson is like an asshole, and she's like not grooving and being like rude and awkward to like the rest of the cast," and they're kind of looking at it crazy. And I think that people were just kind of like making it out of something that it really wasn't. Um, I think that a lot of people were like forgetting that, Brie Larson is a new cast member, like a brand new cast member who hasn't had too much screen time in either of those two movies. Um, so it was very much, throwing a new cast member in to a set of cast members who have already established a strong working relationship. They already kind of have the camaraderie and respect and like the dynamics that they have with the rest of the cast members. And I would compare this to like I would compare the interactions with like the press tour as like if you were, a kid going to school and you don't have to be a kid. You could be a college student and you're seeing a group of friends and you're like, oh, like they're chill and you're trying to like talk to them, get to know them. You're trying to like kind of work. You try to be you, authentically you in like the dynamic, but it just doesn't work. It feels a little awkward at first. And that's what I was seeing a lot of the footage as at first. Like it was coming off as like awkward. Like it's coming off as like it wasn't really coming off as like what a lot of people were trying to guess the situation up to be. And it sucked that, she had to go through that. And it sucked that not too many, of the cast really stood up for her. And, the crew didn't stand up for her either. But granted, I think a lot of people sort of pointed at that as also like kind of an excuse to kind of drag her as well, because it's like, oh, like this is a truly crew would stand by, the cast and crew would stand by to do this when Disney for the longest time hasn't really defended their minority cast when they do cast someone to play a big role like this, and they still struggle with it. um they had this issue with the Star Wars show, and they had this issue with the Little Mermaid. Like these films, they also had kind of this issue with the Marvels too. They not even kind of, they had this issue with the Marvels too. People were dragging like Iman and Tiana Paris and still trying to drag Brie Larson, and nobody was really talking about it. Disney didn't step in. I think that when you're doing something, when you're doing something that brings in, new cast with a new diverse cast, and we're in like knowing that we're in this era where people are there's this kind of like anti woke era that's going on in which you know conservatives and those who are trying to be who are conservatives and are pretending like they're not conservatives are kind of going around being like, oh, like this movie is woke. Every time they see a minority in there for half a second, they're like, oh, this movie is woke. Like, you need to think of the children. You are exposing them to values that aren't, American. Like they are natural, like stuff like that. Like when they go around there yapping about stuff like that, and then Disney is in this kind of situation in which they kind of lose both ways, because these conservatives, the loud minority, because they're like a loud minority, mind you. This they're kind of roaming around. They're kind of acting like they're puffing their chest. They're like, oh, like I can't support this movie because you guys are trying to be woke. Like you guys are doing this and doing that, and it just be like a black woman, or it just be like a gay couple that be in there for like half a second. Like it's nothing major, but they are gonna pull their hair out and jump and have temper tantrums like babies because they can't stand to see someone that does not look like them on screen. So they lose that audience, and then they also kind of have the minority audience that they want to court looking at them crazy, because it's like they're not backing and defending the actor or actress in this role. So now it's kind of like y'all not doing anything, and it's kind of like you're kind of leaving us to do the defense, and it's not healthy to have the audience try to defend, you know, the cast, and have the cast defend themselves against people who are just nasty and mean. Like I feel like people just need to admit that they're just mean people. Like I feel like people just need to admit that rather than trying to make it this weird like woke thing, trying to hide it over something that it's not. People just want to be mean. That's the thing. People want to be mean and offensive, and y'all just need to stand on business. That's my 2 cents on it. That's how Cake sees it. So I was always kind of noticing that, but the first film was good. Um, and I knew that I had a lot of respect for I have a lot of respect for the director behind the Marvels too. Nia DaCosta is like a strong new voice in terms of direction. I really liked what she did with Candyman. Though I will say, um, it was not long enough. I think that ending was a little bit rushed with Candyman. Um, and I'll always tune into what she got going on next. So I saw her directing this, and I said, "Ooh, like I know she probably gonna get studio notes. I know they probably gonna tell her, what to do half of the time. But I'm still gonna tune in for my sis." Um, I said I'm gonna try to tune in. I'm gonna try to see if I can tune in. Um, I'm like, if the trailers look good, I'm gonna try to tune in, and the trailers didn't look bad, so I'm like, oh, I might tune in, and it's which is something within itself, because superhero fatigue. I know I brought up the 2 films that I've seen this year, but superhero fatigue has really kind of gotten me. The last time I saw a Marvel film, and not even like a Marvel film, before this year, before I even seen a superhero film, the last superhero film I saw before Blue Beetle and the Marvels was Thor: Love and Thunder, and we all know how Thor: Love and Thunder was. We don't need to bring that up again. Um, that was rough, and I said, yeah, I had enough. And then the last time I saw something before that, I believe, was like the Eternals in terms of movies. And with the TV shows, with Marvel, I know the only TV show that I really watched was WandaVision, and I liked it until it kind of turned into what the MCU was. I think what pulled me out of the MCU and what gave me superhero fatigue is all these films are the same. They kind of follow a very cut and paste structure. And I was feeling that with a lot of the films in the Infinity Saga as well. And I originally planned on just kind of dropping out of watching superhero content, or at least Marvel content, when the Infinity Saga ended. But then we got the trailer for like WandaVision, and I saw the trailers for Eternals, and I'm like, oh, these look very different from what we've gotten before. And I kind of like that. I like that, I liked how they were kind of going in, and it seemed like it was going to be a lot more experimental and a lot more standalone with these films. They weren't gonna I was hoping that they were gonna be standalone and not kind of fit into a very the next phase or whatever. I feel like that should have been the move for Marvel going forward, but no. WandaVision ended up being very much the same, and was setting up the pieces for this next phase. And then Thor: Love and Thunder was kind of trying to be its own thing, but it also was very, very poor in what it was. And that was kind of like Eternals. Let me not forget about talking about Eternals. Eternals, I thought was good. I know I'm like in the minority who likes the Eternals, and y'all just don't like fun. Like, I feel like sometimes it's like y'all was asking for something different. This was something different. You're like, oh, not this though. Like, this is something different. I kind of appreciated and accepted what it was. I enjoyed the movie for what it was. I didn't really have to hop in and expect that it was going to court or fit into like the major MCU kind of like canon. Like, it would in the end of things, but it was its own thing. And it was like strange and like unique and experimental in what it was doing. So I like respected it. But that, and like after Thor: Love and Thunder, I also tried watching like the first couple episodes of like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I was like, yeah, this is it for TV for me. Like, I couldn't tune into the Marvel shows after that. But after that and Thor: Love and Thunder, I was like, yeah, I'm kind of done. And the other like superhero movies from like the other ends of the world, or like of media, just didn't look that good either. The Flash always didn't look good to me. It always looked suspicious, and I also did not want to tune into a movie with Ezra Miller in it, knowing that they're like a very nasty and like dangerous person. And it was odd that, Warner Brothers was canceling and shelving all these movies, and they're just like, oh, let's spend more money on doing reshoots and doing additional shoots for this movie. And let's continue to like back Ezra Miller. Like they're all right. Like what? Like that never really made sense to me. So I was like, I'm not gonna tune into this. Um, and then they kind of tried to pull the game on y'all and say that this was like the best movie of all time, the best superhero movie of all time, and y'all tuned in and said it was horrible. And I've seen the clips, and I'm like, yeah, this is rough. I don't know what they was talking about. And then Blue Beetle looked good to me, and I was honestly planning on seeing it when it was originally coming out, but then I wasn't really hearing too many good things in terms of reviews, and then Warner Bros. Just kind of gave up on marketing completely. They gave up on marketing completely. They said, "Oh, we don't." After Shazam 2 flopped, after nobody wanted to see Shazam 2, we just not gonna promote this, which is real unfortunate. And I wanted to like tune in and just like support, but I really had like the superhero fatigue was really bad. It was kind of like, oh, like I just couldn't really move for a superhero movie, just period. Any superhero movie, media, period. And it was also the fact that like when that film came out, I was also just very busy with like personal life stuff as well as like content stuff. So it was just kind of like I never really like it was the fact that I didn't have too much time on my hands. So I couldn't sit even if I wanted to go see it, couldn't sit down and see it. Um, but eventually, when it came out as like a $5 fave, eventually I took the time to sit down and watch it. And I enjoyed it, and the trailers didn't look bad. So I was like, oh, like I might tune in a little bit, and I would talk to friends about it. And they're like, oh, I don't want to see this. Like, who wants to see a Marvel movie? I'm like, oh, y'all acted like that now. All right, let me. Y'all not staying on business here. Let me move and see, what's going on. And originally, I was like planning on seeing it, but probably not planning on paying full price for it or seeing it opening weekend. But then Disney and Fandango decided to just start giving tickets away. They said that if you use the code like Marvel Mondays, earlier this week, you could get like a discount off tickets if you saw it in IMAX. And there are also multiple. And the day after I bought my ticket came out to like $20 something, but I only but it was like a $20 off code, so I only paid like with like fees and stuff and taxes. I only paid like $6 for it. The day after I bought my ticket, I was told that there were multiple promo codes and that they were able to stack. So I was like, oh, I could have just got a free ticket. Like people, they were just giving out free tickets and just to see if people would see it. And I went to my IMAX theater, and not too many people went out to see it, even with the promo code. I was sitting in there, it was like sparsely filled. It wasn't like half filled or anything. It was like near empty. And this was like an evening showing on like Thursday night, which is preview night. So I really only saw like hardcore fans of like the MCU, whoever's left of like hardcore fans of the MCU still kind of sitting there and like kind of in the theater with me. So I was seeing a lot of people rep like Marvel merch and everything like that. But I saw the movie. What do I think? I'll say our leads, they did a really good job, together and separate. I feel like Amon was really fun as Ms. Marvel, and I think that's the performance to watch this for, because she was really fun here. And I feel like her character was really well written here as well. I think this is the film where they allowed her to shine the most out of the entire cast, but I feel like Captain Marvel still held her own. I think my criticisms for this was, and the villain was great. I think that this is a fairly competent villain, and kind of cuts back to like, I guess it reminds me a lot of the Infinity Saga films, in which it kind of cuts back to the strategy and the quality that they had back then, for better or for worse. Um, that being said, Do have my criticisms. I think that Tiana Paris's character didn't really get as much. I feel like they really didn't write the film well enough with her character central. Like, I think that with the stuff that was present, they did a good job. I think it was nice seeing her dynamic with Captain Marvel and them kind of being estranged and them kind of trying to work back to being back in like good embraces and being and like having the conversations of like family and family and stuff like that. And I think they did a good job with that. I think my big issue was that with Amon's character, with Amon's performance of Miss Marvel, you could really watch that film and not have to watch the show and like understand it. You were given a lot of context for her character, how her character moves, a lot of the humor and stuff that plays up with her character, and just like her personality and stuff. Like they did a really good job with making sure that we knew who Miss Marvel was and how she would fit into this universe going forward. With Monica Rambeau, with Tiana Paris's performance as Monica Rambeau, they use a lot of like clips and they kind of drop things, a lot of things in like mentions of like, WandaVision and, the previous projects before. And, they also show us clips for both Miss Marvel and WandaVision, so we can get the context back about what happened, how the powers were given, and stuff like that. But I feel like it wasn't like what we got with Miss Marvel, in which it was like, oh, you get like an introduction to the character, and it's very much like personally her own, and then it sends you back to the main plot. It's just kind of like, oh, like she's here, and if you watch WandaVision, you can like you understand the full context. But if you did, you probably feel like you probably are unsure about how important her character is. Um, they increase her importance in the film, especially with like the ending and the end credit scene, which I'll talk about in the spoilers. But outside of that, I feel like her character's still fun. It just isn't as strongly written as I would say the others were. The other criticism, as I pointed on before, like this film felt very choppy in terms of editing. Like it's clear that this went through the editing production room and they was trying to cut it to try to make it work. Um, and sometimes it works, and there's a lot of scenes that I feel like could have been expounded on more. And there's a lot of scenes that are kind of like, why is this here? But overall, they still kind of, with what they had, it was still a fairly competent Marvel product. Like, it can't be fun. Like, I don't have too much to say on that to expound on that. I think, people who are already kind of pulling back from Marvel probably are not going to like this because it's still not back up to the level of the level of quality that we had before this new phase happened. I think it's still very choppy and messy, but I think with all the mess and stuff like this, it's still one of the better. I think it could be argued with some people that it could be one of the better films within the phase, but it could have been great. It's kind of the issue. It's kind of like it's all right, it's good, but it's not great. And I know for a lot of people that's the problem with this phase. There's been a lot of films that have been horrible, and we've been showed before that doesn't have to be the case, and it really shouldn't be the case. But quality controls the issue with them over at Marvel, and they have to hurry up and correct it as soon as possible, or the franchise is a wrap. As we're seeing with the box office here, and which is tracking to be like 40 something million. Spoiler review, real quick. Again, this is spoilers. If you don't want to hear spoilers, hop off now. That end credit scene was a little rough. They like I was spoiled. I heard about the end credit scene before I ended up seeing the movie, but they brought the X-Men in, but why did they do it like that exactly? Like I feel like they could have done a better job teasing and like revealing that the X-Men were gonna be in this. Like, why do we have Kelsey Grammer like come here and introduce, the X-Men? Like, why did we they like they had an alternate version of, um Monica Rambeau's like mom present, and I think that was a good like gotcha moment. And like reveal that they did with that. But why is Kelsey Grammer here? Like, I'm still trying to figure that out. Like, they didn't want to do. I'm assuming, like, I know, like, okay, I know with like Secret Wars and stuff like that, they're still like trying to do the casting of like who the X Men is going to look like, and I'm sure that it's not going to be the same as the Fox version completely. But Kelsey Grammer was definitely a choice. Again, like spoiler reviews talking about like what I liked. Again, I like the villain. I really liked how they talked about how her reasoning for being a villain was literally because she, you know, like the creating the scrolls, like she was created, she was coming in seeing that Captain Marvel was attacking her planet and basically destroyed all of the natural resources and the living conditions of her planet, and doing what she was doing with her weapons and the Bengals to kind of take resources from all the planets that, Captain Marvel loved and protected to bring grace and like the ability to survive back to Hala was definitely something that I think was really strong in terms of a villain. I don't think that they really have done something as strong as that too much in ooh, sorry. um they haven't done anything too strong like that in the phase. I feel like the other like they've done some of it with the TV shows. I think in terms of the films, they've done it with I would say the Eternals, and then um they tried it with Thor: Love and Thunder. I think they with the God Butcher, they kind of like had a good character, but the way that they executed it was very poor. Um, but I think with the villain here, it was fairly well done and fairly well executed. I think that there's a lot of things, there's a lot of individual things here that are like very well done and well executed. I think the only things that like come together here is like some of the direction. Well, I would say the direction for the most part. Obviously, like you can tell it's choppy because of the editing room, but I think the direction here was fairly good. And again, the ensemble within our like lead cast and some of the supporting cast as well are the strong suits here. Um, would I recommend it? I would say yes. I think it's definitely not as good as the first Captain Marvel, but I think some people might enjoy it. It's gonna be a toss up because here's the thing: I haven't watched superhero movies like that. I've been checked out of the MCU for quite a while. There's a lot of movies that I skipped, and I know for MCU fans, this is probably going to be like another bad movie to them. Like, this is going to be another movie that's like, oh god, the quality's still bad. Like, what's going on here, Marvel? Like, y'all used to be great. Now this is just like horrible. Like, I'm like, y'all are tired. Like, y'all are done. Y'all are ready to check out. Um, so I know that hearing someone who hasn't really been through, the frustration and the anger that you guys are kind of sitting through after watching, all of these very messy and low quality like films and shows just be pumped out, come out. But I'm still gonna stand on business and give my positive review. Um, if you want to see it, it's in theaters now. You could always tune in and check it out. Um, but yeah, I mean, would I rewatch it is the other thing. Would I rewatch it? I would say probably not. I think it's very much a one and done type movie. I think you could watch it and get everything that you need to. I feel like if I did rewatch it, and that's the same thing with like all the Marvel movies, there isn't too much that you kind of like sit and miss. I think the only times that like you should rewatch a movie like this is with the bigger event like films like the Avengers films, in which is like, oh, like you're the ensembles together. It's like this big plot, and we won't have that for a good minute with this franchise. So, the only reason I would rewatch this is if one of my friends contact or if like family contacted me and was like, "Hey, do you want to see this?" And I'm like, "Oh, sure." Like I wouldn't mind doing it then, but you know, if I had to kind of like pay out of pocket or like go out of my way again to like see it again on my own, probably not. Um, but that doesn't make it, any less of a bad movie. I think it's still fairly entertaining for the moment. I think those who can watch it can still have somewhat of a good time. Um, but those are my thoughts. This has been Cake Radio. This is a ZCN Ticket Sounds podcast and a Cake Dive co-production. If you like the podcast, be sure to like, subscribe. If you like listening to it on ZCN Ticket, be sure to like and subscribe and let me know if you want more episodes on this channel. Um, because best believe if you guys don't like this podcast, I will move it to the back to the Cake Dive channel. Um, and if you're listening to this on a podcast platform, be sure to share the episode. Be sure to if you're on Spotify, I believe you can go through the Q&A and give me questions to answer live on the podcast. And be sure to follow and share the podcast with your family and friends. Like, if you enjoyed this episode, I'm sure they'll enjoy it too. If that's all, this has been the Cake Dive, and have a great rest of your day, y'all. Peace.